Welcome, everyone. It's 3 o'clock here on the East Coast, so I think we'll get started. I want to thank you for joining us for today's discussion about Irma Olguin Jr.'s journey from University of Toledo graduate to CEO and co-founder of her very own company. We are so excited to be hosting another College of Engineering town hall. Today's conversation between Dean Toole and Irma Olguin Jr. will address the challenges she faced and the accomplishments she's made on her journey to becoming a truly innovative voice in the tech industry. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jennifer Hall, and I'm the Director of Development for the University of Toledo Foundation, working specifically for the College of Engineering. As guests continue to join us, I would like to share a few housekeeping notes about our virtual event. Attendee names are not visible to other attendees. They are only visible to hosts and presenters. Therefore, you will only see your name in the attendee list. For today's presentation, we request that you submit questions for Irma or Dean Toole using the chat box, which will be monitored throughout the session. To access the chat feature, click on the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. The chat panel will appear in the right bottom column. Additionally, if you would like to change the view on your screen, you can click in the upper right corner of your screen to expand or reduce. Now I would like to turn things over to the moderator for today's conversation, Dean of the College of Engineering, Mike Toole.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate it. Good to see everybody. So it's great to be here, and I'm so thankful for Irma for giving her time to this. We were chatting beforehand. She's done this about 50 times before, and this is my second time. So I told her, I said, I don't know heck I'm doing. You tell me what to do because you're the old pro. But Irma, I got to tell you, I know we agreed yesterday not where I was going to lose the tie. We talked about that, but I want to show you this tie. It's from the Museum of Fine Arts of Boston. It was actually my father-in-law who's passed away, unfortunately, but he left me the tie. So I'm going to lose the tie, but I wanted to show it to you ahead of time. So, you know, remember Mr. Rogers used to like walk up to the fireplace and take off his loafers. So I'm taking off the tie in my virtual fireplace. Hey, Irma, I'm going to introduce you and thank you profusely again for coming in a few minutes. But if you don't mind, I'm just going to chat for a couple minutes to fill folks in on what's going on campus, if that's all right. So just hang tight real quick for a second. So, folks, I'm looking and I see some of the participants, some old friends on the line, which is great, some folks in the college. I had to laugh, just a little insight into technology. So this is WebEx we're using. When I click on panelists, some of them have exclamation points next to it. And when I look, and what it says is, this participant is not paying attention. I'm like, how does technology know that they're not paying attention? Anyway, I thought that was pretty funny. So I can check on you if you're not paying attention and report you to somebody. No. Anyway, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it very much. So I want to say a couple things going on campus. And some of you are like, what the heck is happening at colleges across, the nation? I can tell you we're all working really hard, thinking nonstop, obviously balancing safety with trying to get back to normal, just like our country's trying to do. So yesterday, or this week, Monday, we had a kind of a new change. We officially brought all the staff back to campus, back to work. And I'll say, well, that's not accurate at all. First of all, we've all been working since March. We've all been putting in many, many hours a week, more than 40 hours, but remotely. So this time we came back. The other reason that's not accurate is we've had a bunch of faculty doing great research here on campus. They got special permission because they were doing critical research. Some was related to COVID-19, and some of it was just critical research that we would lose a whole year cycle, so we got permission to keep doing it. So that's why it's a little bit different. I got to tell you, I'm wearing my mask. Every time I set foot in my office, I got to put my mask on. It's just weird doing that. I've been wearing it outside in public, but not in my own office, right? And I go around the place, and Scott Malter and others have done a great job of removing furniture, taping off furniture. My friend Craig Bowie's on the call or on this thing. He's got the Bowie Lounge. And Craig, we had to tape off a bunch of your furniture because we got to socially distant, right? So it's kind of a strange place. But on August 17th, students are coming back. We're going to welcome them. We're doing great stuff in the dorms. We're doing great stuff in the classrooms. For some of you who may have heard Interim President Postal talk yesterday, he had this YouTube thing. First of all, what a leader. And, Adrian King, Dr. King said at the beginning, you know what, if you're going to have a president what would be better for during this pandemic than an MD? So Dr. Postal is an MD, so I'm really excited about that. So anyway, he went through a whole bunch of things that we're doing well, again, to welcome students back safely, get a safe community again. But some of our staff are not fully back. We're trying to be a little more flexible of letting them work at home when we can still complete our mission, help our students, and still work remotely. And as you might think about it, so we're a high-touch campus, right? We do a lot of things for students, but we can't have high-touch as in walk into a small office. So that kind of advising and all those things are mostly going to be remote. But our faculty in the classrooms will be wearing a mask like every other student in there. And the larger classrooms, if there are 50 or over classes, we're going to be remotely. So we're doing what a lot of other universities are doing. The one thing I'm going to brag about, and then we'll start this thing, is that we submitted our plan to the state just last week, and Dr. Amy Thompson is leading the charge in the provost office. And the state looked at it and they said, that is the gold standard. UToledo, the gold standard for the state. So I was pretty happy when I heard that. Anyway, so that's what's going on around campus. Like I say, a little different. That's what our nation is going through now. But today, we got a great event. So Irma Olguin, I got to tell you how I heard about her. First of all, I try and follow famous alums, right? And people we're really proud of. We're proud of a lot, but so I've been following her for a while, kind of stalking her, on the internet and everything. And then I heard of a chance she was coming to UToledo, and Irma and I were talking. We couldn't remember if it was January or last fall. And I'm like, this is my chance to see her. She was invited to speak at Owens Corning by the chapter of ACMW, Association for Computing Machinery Women. Is that right, Irma? I think that's the title. Yep. Which is a great organization in this area. They invited her back. She kindly came. I listened to probably, 100, 150 in the room. I took 3 pages of notes, and she only spoke for like an hour and 10 minutes. And I'm just cranking that. And I'm like, people got to hear this story. So with that, Irma, thank you so much for coming. I want to hear your story. I'm not going to talk forever about your background, but because, it's all on the internet, folks, and just search for it. Maybe some of you caught it in the Blade article that came out yesterday. Cover of Forbes, California Women of the Year in 2016 and got the award in 2017. She's founded, 59 Days of Code, #Edit LLC, and Overfund, and now we're talking about Bitwise, I think mostly is part of the story today. Amazing things. I'm so proud to have her, and I know how busy you are, Irma. Thank you so much. So with that, welcome. Welcome. And if you don't mind, I'll start with the basic thing is, tell us, before the whole thing, you've done amazing things in your career. Tell us about getting from Fresno, your hometown, and your family background and all that, right to University of Toledo. How did we get so lucky to get you?
It's a long story, Dean, but I think it's a good one, and I'm really excited to tell it. So thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation to come and have a chit chat with you all. I'm really excited. Any connectivity that I can continue to have with the university, I'm excited for. So I'm from a very, very small town called Carruthers, California. So I'm from the West Coast. In fact, right now I'm 3 hours before you, right? So Pacific time, sitting here in California where it's 100 degrees. And to understand how I ended up in Ohio, I think it's really important to understand the context that I come from, right? So let me sort of give it some color. California is a really big state. Big as in like geographically big. You can drive, get early in the morning, and stop driving late at night and still not have reached, the end of California. And so that is surprising to some people. But maybe what's more surprising is that a lot of the things that you see have been Hollywoodized so much about California that there's this entire middle section of California that we don't talk about that much. And it doesn't look like palm trees and beaches and, what have you. It doesn't look like the Bay Area. Instead, it's these great big swaths of ag land with grapes and almonds and peaches and watermelons and, all manner of food. So much so, in fact, that the Central Valley produces between 20 and 30% of the world's food. It's a ton of industry that we get to sort of live and take advantage of, and then we ship, of course, that food worldwide to all kinds of places. In fact, one of the neat, fun experiences for me was walking through a grocery store, through Kroger in Toledo, and seen stickers from Dinuba, California, and Watsonville, California. And these are places that are 30-minute drives from me, and that's where you buy your fruit from, right? So anyway, that is the context. And why that matters is because ag has always been our driving industry here in the center of California. What that has created is this real sort of disparate system of folks who own the land and sort of benefit from that production. And then there's a completely different class for those who work the land, the labor, right? And that is the story of my family. My family immigrated to California following the crops, as many migrant families do, landed here and began picking grapes and rolling raisins. And that is the story of my life. My aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, my cousins, my brother, my sister, you know, all of us. I got my first job when I was 6 years old, rolling raisins in the field. And what that means, and I'll just give a little bit of color and context there, rolling raisins is one of the steps of the process to make a raisin. So it begins as a grape. You put these giant sheets of paper on the ground. It's very dusty, and you cut the grapes and you lay them on this sheet of paper, and then they dry in the sun. And then at the end of the drying period, because it is very hot here, it literally is 100 degrees, at the end of that drying period, you roll those pieces of paper up and you create these little bundles and you stack them atop each other. So anyway, my first job was rolling those sheets of paper. I was very young, and that was my first job. That was the first job of a lot of folks who grew up in this place. And but what that means, like, you know, I think a lot of folks have a story of hardship and hard work, and families who really just did what they needed to do to get by. That's the story of the place that I live. My story is not unique in that that's how I grew up. My story is only unique in where I landed, right? The fact that I get to tell it now is really unique. But what that turned into is you kind of see your life continuing along that road, right? This is what your parents did. This is what your grandparents did. This is what everyone you know does. And everyone you know is living that same struggle, right? Which is to say that the highest and best you can do is work as many hours as you can get in and still not be able to pay all of your bills in the same month, right? And so the version of success that I was chasing at, you know, that 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old Irma was like, success to me was getting a job at Ace Hardware or at, you know, the local gas station or restaurant, working my way up into management, being able to pay all my bills in the same month. That was what success looked like to me. It was to leave the fields and do something else such that you weren't trading your utility bill for your rent or your car payment for your groceries, right? And so that was what I saw happening for me. But this really interesting thing happened when I was about 15 years old. I was a junior, I think, in high school. I'm sitting in class one day, and I hear over the loudspeaker that they're holding the PSAT in the cafeteria. And I don't know what the PSAT is. Like, I don't have a context for that. I don't really understand what they're saying to me, but I'm 15 years old. And a 15-year-old hears this announcement, and they think to themselves, oh, if I go to the cafeteria, I can get out of school for half a day. I can get out of class, which is exactly what I did because I'm 15 years old, you know. So I go to the cafeteria, and I sit for this test, the PSAT, and it would turn out to be the single most important test I'd ever take in my existence, right? All the years of my life, that would be the most important test that I would take. Because what happened next, I was a pretty good student. You know, you stay out of trouble and you know, fill in the bubbles, right? Like, you use a number 2 pencil. Like, what happened next was this really fun and exciting thing where mail started arriving at my parents' house, my house, that had my name on it. And it was like these packets of college information from other schools, which is essentially marketing material, right? Like, I didn't know that at the time, like, you put that together later, but it's addressed to me. And I'm, you know, 15, 16 years old, and here is the University of Southern California with the Trojan and everything, like, addressing a letter to me, which is basically an invitation to come to school. And that was the first time that I thought to myself that maybe I would go to college, and that maybe college would be something that I would be good at. So, you know, you take that full color, glossy, printed catalog, and you're flipping through it and you get to the pricing page and you're thinking, okay, maybe this isn't for me. This is still for other people. But the mail kept coming. And some emblems and some mascots I recognized, and some of them I didn't. But nonetheless, they had my name on it, and it was an invitation, and that was profound for me. And then one day, I get a piece of mail from the University of Toledo, and I open it up. I opened up every single one, let me tell you, Dean. Like, I opened up every single one. I looked at every catalog. It was just like the dreams begin to grow inside of you of like, what would it be like to be one of those kids with a backpack on, walking across the yard, and end up in a catalog. And so I opened the one from the University of Toledo, and this one, the letter is different. It's not Dear Irma, we're pleased to send you our catalog. It's Dear Irma, if you do these things, we have a scholarship for you to come to school. And I legitimately took it to my parents, and I said, is this a joke? I think that this might be some sort of, spam. And my parents said, well, why don't you give them a call? And so I called the University of Toledo in Ohio. I still hadn't looked it up on a map yet. And I asked if it was real, and it was confirmed. Like, yeah, no, that's a genuine thing. Like, this is an offer to come to school at the University of Toledo and, accept a scholarship to do that. And so I took that information to my parents, and I'm like, Mom, Dad, let me tell you, like, this is a full academic scholarship. Like, this is an opportunity for not just me, but us as a family. This is huge. And they have a pretty miserable job. I think about this sometimes. I think about what it must have been like to be my parents in that moment. Because they had the miserable job of having to say, this is really great, and we're obviously very proud of you, but how do you think you're going to get from California to Ohio? What do you think that looks like for us? We don't have a working vehicle. We've been rolling around on a donut for, the last 5 weeks, hoping it doesn't give out. And nobody we know has a working vehicle. I mean, plane tickets are in the hundreds of dollars. Like, that's rent. So how is that going to work for someone like you? And so that was disheartening. And so you're still thinking, man, college still is not for people like me. And I think my parents, like, more than anyone, had to deal with that reality. They had to deal with, like, you're doing all these things right. You're working as hard as you can. You've got an opportunity in front of you. You still can't take it. You still can't do anything with it. And but we're a scrappy family. And we ended up, my family, we spent a lot of time in the fields. And so we would ride around in a pickup truck and recycle cans and bottles, pick up cans and bottles from the fields, recycle them, and then get a pile of change back. We did that enough times over the summer that we were able to afford a Greyhound bus ticket. And that ticket, it was in August, and I rode for almost 4 days, 2,500 miles from Toledo, Ohio, from Fresno, California to Toledo, Ohio, to arrive at orientation to sign up to accept that scholarship. And that's sort of the story of how I arrived at the University of Toledo, not part of this great design or great plan, but like serendipity really had a hand in what was happening there. And I think, Dean, I don't know if this is relevant, but I think the story of how I ended up choosing my major would be maybe relevant to this audience, because I can tell you, 17-year-old Irma on a bus was not thinking about, what is the most opportune major for a person in this era, or what is going to be the highest and best version of my existence. 17-year-old Irma on that bus was thinking about, man, I'm going across the country where I don't know anyone, and this is going to be a blast if I can just figure out how the system works, And so I arrive at orientation. I'm filthy, by the way, because, 4 days on a bus, And fun anecdote, I ended up taking a shower in like a trucker's truck stop, like somewhere halfway along the way, so I wouldn't arrive, destitute, but it's not enough. Like, you really do need multiple showers. just a hot tip for you all. So anyway, I arrive at orientation and I go to registration or to check-in, And I look across the table to the lady, and she says, okay, name, soc, all of these things. What's your major? And that was the first of about 2,000 moments where I'm like, oh man, I really don't know what I'm doing at all. And I had to look back at her, and I was like, what's a major? And she explained to me what it means to declare a major and how sort of your studies fall from all of that, and help me begin to learn what college is really about. Because again, growing up, the place that I did and the way that I did with the people around me that I had, we didn't know how it worked. We didn't know what the system was really like. And anyway, so she looks back across the table and she hands me the catalog, the same one that was mailed to me. And she was like, these are the major areas of study. You can change it later, but we've got to put something down so that we can send you basically to the right college to do all of your orientation blocks and stuff like that. And so I'm looking through the catalog, Dean. I'm not kidding. My hand to God, this is a real story. I'm looking through the catalog, and there's this beautiful glass building right there, and it's brand new. And I thought to myself, 17 years old, across the country, I don't know anybody. I thought to myself, how rad would it be to take classes in a glass building? And that turned out to be Nitschke Hall, part of the College of Engineering, which is the serendipitous story of how I became a computer engineer and a computer scientist. Again, not part of a larger plan, just serendipity, having that big old slap across the face from time to time. But I was making 15 and 17-year-old decisions. I was not plotting my life out so that I could one day, run a $100 million company. That was, but here we are. Here we are.
That's a great story, and it's good to hear it again. It really is. And, I started thinking, for me, I'm a civil engineer, and it's because I talked to my guidance counselor, and he's like, you can do well in math, you should be an engineer. And I'm like, well, I like to hike a lot, so what's going to get me outdoors? He's like, civil engineering, right? I didn't know, but here I am. Anyway, yeah. And no regrets. So I'm sitting here, by the way, in the top floor of Nitschke right now, so the building that you looked at. In all seriousness, it's a great story, but you know what? So today, we got three things that we focus on at UToledo, in the College of Engineering especially, right? Student success, in fact, impactful research, and more student success. But the fact is, when you were here, I'm not sure if we made it that easy for you. So, full disclosure, anything going on that made it particularly tough, either we did wrong or, engineering's not easy, period. But what were you wrestling with while you were here as a student?
It's hindsight, right? I didn't realize this at the time. I didn't realize how unique a person I was for that setting. It wasn't something that I thought about a lot. I mean, I came from a very diverse place. Everybody here, eats tacos and speaks Spanish, and that was really common. And then I go from California to Ohio, and that is really not. I mean, Toledo was not that, right? It was not that same place. So there was some culture shock there. And I'm also part of the, I'm a female engineer. At the time, there weren't that many, even today, aren't that many of us out there. I am LGBTQ and fully out and very proud to speak on behalf of my community. In that time, not so much, not as prevalent, right? I'm also Latinx, right? So I'm a Latina. And in that time and in that place, not that many of us. And so I was in so many different settings, the only one of whatever, the only brown person, the only LGBTQ person, or at least one that was out, the only female in a lot of different settings. But I don't really fault anyone that I was around, right? I had so much support and community that was, honestly, the University of Toledo was extremely welcoming. And I never, ever faced anything that even resembled discrimination. The wider city and the county around, slightly different, right? And again, different time, different cultural expectations. And so there were definitely moments where you're worried about your person, right? You fear for yourself as a person, or your bodily safety and those types of things. But was never the fault of anybody that I interacted with at the university. It was never the fault of the students that I went to school with, or from the provost all the way to the janitors. I felt extremely welcome. And even though I was the only fill in the blank, that never resonated to me as, and that's your fault,
Yeah, good. Hey, did you do co-ops? I forgot, while you were here as a student?
I did, yes.
And those were they good?
Oh my gosh. I credit co-ops with, I talk about co-ops all the time. I actually think more universities should adopt that system.
Yeah.
It is this critical component, at least of my story. And there's an anecdote here that I tell. The reason that I do Bitwise today, and we can talk about what Bitwise is a little bit later, but the reason I do Bitwise today really has a lot to do with my experience in co-op. The very first co-op that I had, I was working I was doing GIS work, mapping work, and I was the only female on the team, totally fine. Again, really great camaraderie between myself and the other engineers who were doing work. But that first job, I out-earned everybody I knew in my family. First job, entry level, my hourly rate through the roof as compared to what my family was earning back here in California. And that, you know, at a high level, I think when you recognize that, that's big and that's profound, but it's these little moments that really just punch you in the heart, you know, like you just like recognize what the opportunity is in front of you, and you have to hold on to it with your teeth. You know, you just have to. I remember working late with some of my colleagues, and they had decided to order a pizza. And I had cash on me, so when they came to deliver the pizza, one of my colleagues came up and grabbed the cash from me, and he goes to the door to get it. And he yells back to me, "How much do you want to leave for tip?" And I yell back to him, "Tell him to keep the change," which is like, I don't know if I can illustrate in any I don't have the eloquent words to tell you what a moment like that actually means to a person like me. The fact that I wasn't calculating whether or not I needed the extra buck for gas, or if I was going to make rent, or if, you know, I wasn't doing math about whether or not 57 cents was going to matter, right? But I was thinking to myself, but that extra buck might help out that delivery person.
Yeah.
Huge, profound, like seismic. Like I can't even tell you how big of a moment that was for me. And I remember actually feeling like this white hot and then super blue cold feeling like a wash over my body, and I was changed forever. And I realized not just the College of Engineering and not just that co-op, but the technology industry as a whole would forever and radically change my existence, and not just mine, but that of my family as well. And so, you know, eventually, if we talk about it, that's what Bitwise is about: is creating that feeling in more people that they have a sense of agency, that they can do something to help someone else.
Yeah, no, that's great. Oh, it's all right. You're in the driver's seat here. Do you want to talk about Bitwise right away, or your path to Bitwise? Whatever you want. Either one will, right? Well. Yeah,
I think they're the same, Dean. To be honest with you, I mean, the path to Bitwise is Bitwise.
If you keep calling me Dean and not Mike, I'm going to call you Olguin. I warned you that.
You're still the dean, and I'm still a student in my mind. You know, I had this really wonderful experience. Co-op was a huge part of that, and I got to work for these really wonderful companies, bouncing around, doing exciting things. But there was a family tragedy. My dad died right before I graduated.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, you know, we talked about this a little bit before, but lots of folks go through something hard like that when they're in school, right? Yeah. Lots of folks. And there's not really a right decision or a wrong decision that you can make in those moments, because it's tragedy and everybody's going to deal with that differently. But it will shape whatever happens next, you know? And so my dad died. He was a very big part of like the stability of my nuclear family back here in California. And with him gone, everything that I had been spending those 5 years on in Ohio was sort of just wiped clean suddenly. All of the network that I had built, the job prospects that were in front of me, the life of high wage, high growth jobs was just like, oh man, I have to go home. I have to go contribute to this family, and not have to, but I want to. I want to be with my pack, you know. And so I ended up doing that. I ended up going back to coming back to the Central Valley, where, you know, again, Fresno, you heard me describe it before, but if you're looking for the technology industry in California, you're not looking at Fresno. Like, I promise you, that you are looking 2.5 hours to the north and west, closer to the Bay Area, or 4 hours south in Los Angeles, right? Like those are the two hotspots that you're looking for. And I mean hotspot in a different way than we need this in like the COVID-19 era. So coming back to Fresno was starting again. There was really not a technology industry that was obvious to someone like me. All of my contacts were on the East Coast and in the Midwest. And coming back here was just, it was devastating. It was tough. But I had this gift of all of these technology experiences, right? I had collected all of these pieces of information throughout these different co-ops and side hustles and part-time jobs and everything else that you do over that period of time. And I got to bring that back with me. I literally, and I tell people this all the time, I got to bring back to Fresno everything that Toledo taught me, which is like, that's not the sort of thing you expect to hear from folks, I don't think, right? You think that so many times, I think folks feel the need to leave somewhere, to leave their hometown in order to be their highest and best. But I'm telling you, Toledo, you're already there. Like you're already where it's great. And I got to bring so much of that back with me to California. In particular, figuring out how to realize or actualize the experience of being a technologist in the middle of California, where honestly, it's easier to find somebody who knows how to grow a grape than it is to find somebody who knows what a microprocessor even looks like, right? So that's the context is just so wildly different. So came back and, you know, it's that bus story all over again, to be honest with you. I was cleaning out garages and pantries for crock pots and guitars and, you know, skillets and stuff like that, and then taking that stuff to the flea market to sell it so that I could get gas money to go to job interviews. Like it was just, you know, you're just doing that again. And I ended up working a couple of different jobs when I got back. I became an IT specialist for like a network engineer for a school district. I ended up building websites. And really, like, I ended up specializing in the long run in, like, helping entrepreneurs. But in between then, I ended up teaching for a year as a single subject specialist and helping people learn to code, you know, which, again, bringing the knowledge that I had gained from Toledo back to Fresno was really, really extraordinary. And then imparting that to 16 and 17-year-olds and explaining to them what the PSAT is and, you know, all of that was really, really neat. Turns out, though, Dean, I'm not made to be a teacher. You've got to have a bigger heart than I have. You've got to really just in general be a better person. And left that to work in this startup incubator, which was a startup incubator. A lot of times when we think about that present day, you think about technology startups. But that incubator in particular was for any kind of startup. So you might be starting a pet grooming shop, or you might be starting a new restaurant or what have you. And what I did inside of the incubator was I freelanced for every startup there. I was connecting computers. I was pulling cables through walls. I was building small brochure level websites. I was helping them hire technical talent. Really across the board. And I have to tell you, that was the moment for me. It was another one of those keep the change moments when I realized this is how I have to spend my time. You know, these are people who are giving up time with family and savings accounts and literally everything to make a dream come true. They had a dream. They wanted to open a pet grooming shop. You know, they wanted to open up a restaurant, and they are just going to pour into it blood, sweat, and tears, and I'm going to help them. And that became really the way that I decided to live my professional career is, can I set up systems that help people feel that way, to help them feel like the wind is at their back from a technology perspective? And can we provide opportunity by lending our skills in that direction? Did a couple of things, worked for a bunch of startups. I ended up starting, you mentioned earlier, a competition called 59 Days of Code, which is, it's a nonprofit now, but at first it was just an initiative to help draw technologists out of the woodwork, because when you're in a place like Fresno, figuring out where those folks are can be a challenge, right? And I imagine, you know, I know that at some level outside of the university, Toledo struggles with a similar thing, which is like where and who is doing this exciting work. They're around. You just gotta, find them. They're wearing hoodies and flip-flops and hanging out at Starbucks for far too long, right? So started that 59 days of code to do that. And that led to a number of things. That led to opening the Central Valley's first co-working space. It was the first 24-hour co-working space, if I'm not mistaken, in all of California. But I didn't know that. I didn't even know that was what it was called. To me, it was just like, this is a place where you can come for $29 a month and get stuff done. Super fast internet, free coffee, big tables. That was it, And what happened in that space was extraordinary. It was just, you saw these ambitious people, again, with their dreams in their hands, crashing into accidentally their co-founder or the technical designer or the content writer or, in this space, and companies were forming and growing out of that space. And realized really quickly, I think in the period of like 2 years, I saw something like 6 or 8 different startups form from that space, literally because they met each other and were able to work together in that space. And it became really obvious that there was not necessarily a next for those people. Where are they going to hire? Where are they going to office? Where are they going to find their sense of community once they grow beyond 1 and 2 people throwing ideas back and forth, right? And the thought that places like Fresno lose so many wonderful ideas and wonderful entrepreneurs to the fact that there isn't a next, what seemed to me a solvable problem. So between knowing that this was happening again and again, scrappy, ambitious people making a dream come true, and then knowing what the technology industry did to me and for me in my life, it seemed to me like those things matched, like they clicked together. Scrappy, ambitious technology talent needs a place to go and work. Scrappy and ambitious entrepreneur has a dream, needs technology talent to make it work. Click them together, right? Let's do that. And that ultimately became Bitwise Industries. That's the story of how we got from Toledo back to Fresno so that we could make this dream come true.
With some startups along the way, which I guess they can read that on your various web pages and everything like that. So tell us more, like the assets of Bitwise. And I think there's, do I remember 3 different parts kind of? I mean, you got the real estate, and is that mostly your partner? And then you got the other 2. Well, tell us about the other 2, I guess, or all of them. Yeah,
I mean, when we started Bitwise, I have a co-founder. His name is Jake Soberall. He's wonderful. He was actually my intellectual property attorney for a different startup that I had started. And he was a very young attorney and he just moved back to Fresno. His family is from here, but he went away. Similar to my story, but opposite sides of the tracks, right? Where he went away to school for early career and work experience, returned home believing that the highest and best version of his future lived in Fresno. We crash into each other when I need an IP attorney for some software that we're copywriting. And then we get to chopping it up, and we are sharing our frustrations around the idea that there's no next for a lot of these people. There's no next and what will happen is they'll go somewhere else. They'll go to the Bay Area or Portland or Austin or somewhere else. And when we were sharing our frustrations around that, we realized that we could do something about it. So in 2013, we started this company, Bitwise Industries, believing that we could use the technology industry to fix the city. And in order to really accomplish that, there were 3 sort of pillars that we knew you had to do. You had to do them all at once because it's not implicit that somebody else is going to do the other thing. You have to be able to take a person from a story of poverty and give them a pathway into the technology industry. What does it look like for the son or daughter of a migrant farm worker, or from the son or daughter of a welder, or the son or daughter of any labor force? What does it look like for that person to skill into the technology industry? And so that, for us, it falls under the banner of Geekwise Academy. And that is our answer to technology education. This is fast, no fluff, skills-based. You're touching enterprise level work as soon as humanly possible. There's no waiting. That's pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is a sense of place, right? That's what you were just describing with the real estate business. The sense of place is really, really important. When you think of Fresno, Bakersfield, Merced, Toledo, and you think to yourself, where do I go to find the technology? Like, if I'm physically going to go to locate the technology industry, where am I going to go? And if you don't immediately have an answer to that in that city, you're going to start thinking of other places. You're going to start thinking of the Bay Area, and Portland, and Austin, and Silicon Valley. And so for us, it was really important that we build those places that meet the aspirations of technologists, because we've said this before, but it does not matter if you are from Akron or Menlo Park. You can conjure an image of what the inside of Google looks like, and it's better than whatever you're building in your hometown, right? And so we wanted to fix that. Can we buy blighted properties in our downtown and make them have that same feel, that same experience that actualizes what it feels like to be a technologist in a different place, in a technology hub of global importance? Can you create that same feeling? And so that's that middle sort of pier pillar is that real estate play. And then the last is industry, which is proof. Proof that you can build and ship world-class software that goes toe-to-toe with anyone else in the entire world from these underdog people in these underdog places. Can you do that? And can you ship that software back and have a good report? And can you build companies out of those same people? So those are the three pillars of our business. It's a lot of moving parts, and every time, somebody like we get asked a lot, like, why are you different from other people? Dean, I can probably promise you that we did not come up with a better way to teach people JavaScript than anyone else. That's not our secret sauce. Our secret sauce, honestly, is that we know what it's like to come from these stories, and that we know that it's not about the technical barriers to entry, it's the non-technical barriers to entry. It's the fact that people like me are not expected to become computer engineers, right? It's that people like me, maybe English isn't your first language. It's that you don't have money for the bus ticket, right? It's those things that stop people from taking advantage of the fastest growing industry on the planet.
Right.
And so we built a system that addresses those things, and then we sprinkle the JavaScript on top, right? Like, it really does become sort of part of the next piece for folks. Is you just need someone who's going to help block and tackle for you. That's what it's about. You need somebody who's going to help you go from one class, and I use air quotes for that, but one class to another, and drag them sort of behind you, right? And that's really what the magic of Bitwise is. We've been at this for now 7 years. In 2019, so a year ago, we announced that we closed the Series A, which, for those of you who aren't super familiar with venture capital, it's a round of venture financing, or a capital event where you raise money. And we closed one of the largest Series A ever for a female-led Latinx company. And the idea there was that we were having so much success in Fresno that it became obvious and really like duty bound to take that model to other places. But Bitwise does not work in the Bay Area. Bitwise does not work in New York City. Bitwise works in places where it's super hard.
Yeah.
Right? That's what it was built to do. It was built to be drought resistant,
Yeah.
And so you've got to put it in those places. And so we're taking our model now. We're in 4 California cities. This is not public yet, but we're looking to close a Series B this year, which is really, really fast. We took a 36-month plan and then accomplished it in 12 months.
Wow.
So we're going to go out and raise our Series B, and those dollars will be intended to move across the country. So we'll move to 6 additional cities throughout the United States, we hope, in the next 24 months.
That's so cool. So can I suggest maybe Toledo? Because just seriously, on I think 2 days ago, I got a very articulate letter from the NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers, who were saying, Dean Toole, with all the Black Lives Matter, with all the recent events, the things that have really come to the fore recently, even though they've been going on for decades, centuries, here's what we think we need to do to make us an inclusive environment. And one of the things they talked about was we got to have coding ability in the high schools. I kid you not, that was one of their recommendations. So, and we were talking about it. We'd love to get more TPS, Toledo Public School students, but, providing that coding. So Geekwise would be awesome here in Toledo, Hey, I got a question for you, though. So through your intellect, your hard work, and Toledo helped, you acquired an amazing portfolio of kind of hard, quantitative technology skills. And yet now you're building organizations while you're building people along the way. Tell us about the soft skills, and you clearly got it. You're clearly charismatic. How did that come along? And what do you use more these days? You know, the people skills, the interpersonal, the strategy, or those kind of still relying on those basic tech skills?
Oh man, no, it's for sure it's the stuff in between. It's for sure the stuff in between. I mean, I'm believe it or not, I don't particularly love. I'm an introvert. I'll put it that way. I was going to say I don't people, but, you know. No, I mean, learning to speak and learning to be with people is a skill that you learn because somebody has to tell the story. Like you've got to give people something they can relate to. They have to see themselves a little bit in what you're talking about, or else it just doesn't resonate, doesn't catch on. And so that was a learned skill for me.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to like the things that really make it work, I think for technologists, there's this, I can't remember, gosh, I wish I could remember who said it, but it's technology that's sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. And that's true. Like you have to have, in the technology industry, in entrepreneurship, you have to have people who are thinking about things that don't exist yet today. And in order to go from where we're at to those things, you have to be a little bit delusional. I mean, this is the truth. You have to be a little bit delusional that you think that you can make something that doesn't yet exist. And when people tell you no, or they smirk at you, or they, you know, maybe are not 100% about your ideas, you got to do it anyway, right? That's the magic, right? Like that's the true piece of magic, is doing it anyway in spite of the things that are not going well. And, and many times they just won't go well.
Yeah. Hey, do you mind if we turn to a question from, questions are coming in. We got about 15 minutes, folks, so go ahead and enter your questions. A friend of mine wrote, Craig Bowie wrote, Irma, did you have another career or business idea that led you to the startup incubator before you found your niche helping other entrepreneurs start up their businesses? So I guess maybe tell us about some of those earlier startups.
Yeah, I was freelancing. Well, I think my first startup was selling crock pots at the flea market.
Okay.
You know, let's not discount the experience of what it's like to haggle in real time, you know? Yeah. Everything along the way, I like to think of life as like a series of lily pads, right? You're just hopping from one thing to the next. And sometimes it's a bigger lily pad and sometimes it's a smaller one, but there's a next. And so whether it's selling crock pots at a flea market, or it is building websites for pet groomers, right? Or if it is pulling cables through the ceilings of, you know, rich people's homes, like in any of those things, there's an opportunity to create business. And that, you know, and that's really, I didn't know it. I didn't have the language for it at the time, but that's what I have always been doing.
Yeah. Very good. So somebody asked, you know, so you talk about taking some investment from VC, from venture capital. They invest for a reason. They want to harvest. So that would be going public or getting acquired, or what's ahead for Bitwise, I guess, in your dreams, or, you know, realistically, whatever. Yeah,
it's interesting. I think, so here in Fresno, we have 200 people who are earning more than they've ever earned in their lives. And 200 people in any given city who are in a high growth, high wage job has a profound impact on that local economy, right? That's more sandwiches that are being bought, more cups of coffee, more taxes that are being paid for roads and schools and other things. And we believe that we can do that 50 additional times. Like it's not hard to imagine, you know, 200 to 500 folks earning those wages in these otherwise maybe artificially depressed places across America, having a similar impact. You do that enough times and you really are changing a lot of things. You're changing the person's life, their community, their family, changing how they vote. You're changing, I mean, all of those things become really how informed they are in terms of being part of the electorate, right? Like all of those things matter. We have interest from different places to buy one piece or another of our business all the time, right? That's great. I think that's a great market signal that we're doing something correctly and that we're running a robust business. But honestly, the highest and best is when you keep them all together, and it's this self-reinforcing ecosystem of things, and where you're creating. It's almost like, think about it like the starter pack for igniting the technology industry in any place. You take that starter pack, you customize it for that place, and then boom, explosion, right. We hope. And so we think that if we do that enough times, there's a public offering in the future. We think that if you take them all together, you can really change the country.
Very nice. Speaking of the country, can I take us a little different direction?
Yeah.
Mentioning that Nesby, email to me, you know what, there's a lot of things to be depressed about in this nation, but there's also signs of hope, right? And moving forward, and maybe we're going to move in fits and starts. And what is Black Lives Matter to you, this dialogue? And of course, it's very relevant to, Black, brown people, lots of LGBT community, right? We're all fighting for similar. What does it mean? Are you excited about today? Are you sad about today and our nation and what's happening? What does it mean to you?
I think not just the pandemic, but the Black Lives Matter movement. Pride Month was in June, which is big for the LGBTQ community. You've got Hispanic Heritage Month coming up in September. I think now more than ever, folks are paying attention to some of these things. I think before, if you didn't self-identify with one of these groups, it was just not for you, and it wasn't your business, right? And now it's very obvious that this is everybody's business.
Yeah.
And that makes me hopeful. That makes me feel really encouraged that my allies in other people groups and other people groups are getting on board and standing now shoulder to shoulder with me. I think also, though, what that is highlighting is how many folks still don't, right, and still aren't.
Right.
And there's a lot. I think that there's historical and cultural context that comes into that. There's policy. There are all of these moving pieces. But for me, the greatest thing that this is exposing, obviously the pandemic is exposing these inequities. The Black Lives Matter movement is exposing these inequities, all incredibly important. But I think it's time that we start looking at, we hear a lot about diversity and inclusion in the technology industry or in the engineering industry as a whole. And, I think it's time that we actually just say out loud that these larger companies who have been aware of the problem for as long as you and I have been aware of the problem are either really bad at solving it or are lying about their interest in solving it.
Mm.
And I think it's time that we start saying that out loud, but we can do something about that. So it's not just about calling other people's calling other people out. It's about also then saying, and here are the 10 things that I'm doing to make sure I don't fall into that same camp. And that feels incredibly important. I think that the personal level of responsibility in diversity, inclusion, equity, whether it's pandemic, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ, National Hispanic, heritage, all of those things, take all of those things together, and that level of personal responsibility is really going up. And you'll love to see it.
Great, thank you. Here's a good question. My daughter is a 12-year-old, and she's interested in engineering. What advice do you have for her?
When I was 12, I didn't know the word engineering. That's really, I think I have the same advice for something like that as I have for any profession, which is surround yourself with people who are going to encourage you, right? And surround yourself, surround yourself with people who are not going to make you feel like a failure, even if you choose not to go and do that. 12 years old is an incredibly young age to decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life, right? And so let's be excited for her today. Let's encourage her today. But if tomorrow she decides like, hey, this is not for me, and picks up a paintbrush, let's encourage that too. Yeah,
that's good. But we got to make sure that her identity somehow doesn't think that the path's not for her, which is what your points earlier. Yeah. Everybody, we want to, and we do the biggest Engineers Week in Ohio here. We win awards all the time in the whole Toledo. It's not just UToledo. And we want to make sure that everybody, 6-year-old girls are coming in and saying, yeah, I could be an engineer for sure.
Yeah. Can I just comment on that? That's really important.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you said that. I think that we really do need to be doing more for young women, gender nonconforming, minorities, new majority, depending on where you live. But I think we should also not treat that as a commitment, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we should think about those things as exposing young people to a different version of their own lives but not necessarily something that they're committing to when they're 6 and 7 years old.
Yeah.
And that feels really important to me because one of the worst things that we can do, I think, for too young people is expect them to have it figured out. If there's anything that you took away from my story, it is that there was no grand plan, right? This was not a series of things that I had mapped out that were going to happen so that one day I could be giving this speech. Instead, it's like a series of opportunities, a series of lily pads, and you've got to choose the best one that's in front of you. And then when you get there, of course, you hold on. But it's a series of lily pads. It doesn't have to be a straight line.
That's a very cool analogy. But this one of the questions is, how did you achieve, you had a 36-month plan and you achieved it in 12 months. That wasn't lily pads, right? How did you do that?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you all have heard this, but aside from the fact that there are people who are very, very sick and in some cases dying, the pandemic is an accelerant, right? And they say, crisis is a terrible thing to waste. I don't know how sure that statement is, but it accelerates so many things. And we had to recognize, we went from, this is middle of March, we went from this thriving, bustling business in our downtown and in 3 different cities to overnight, 60% of our business didn't work anymore. Because we're so place-based and so community-oriented, and all of our classes are held in person, and so you have to figure out really, really quickly what you're going to do, right? What are you going to do next? And we pivoted really hard, took a lot of left turns. We developed onwardus.org. We developed our Take Care program, which helps food banks deliver food to families. We made our restaurant app. One of our portfolio companies is a restaurant app called Order Slip. We made that free to everyone who's moving to a to-go, a takeout only model. All of the right things were already in place to hit our 36-month mark. And then pandemic hits and you work overnight. And so it was just a matter of everything that you thought you were going to take 2 years to do. Okay, now you have 4 months, go. And we're able to do it because I work with the best people on earth. There's no doubt in my mind that we have the best possible team for this. And everybody just stepped right up to the plate, it was put me in coach all over the place. What do we got to do? How are we going to get through this? And that's just the most gratifying possible thing you can imagine as an entrepreneur. And as the owner of a company, you just hope people say, put me in coach when things get really hard.
Yep. Hey, we got about 3 minutes left. There's some great questions. I'm going to connect you with my friend Robin Whitney at ProMedica. That was one of the things that will get you connected, Robin. She's two wonderful people. What else would you like to say with us? Other advice? I mean, the fact is, a little pressure on you. You're a heck of a role model for a whole bunch of folks, right? And so, lay us on us in the last couple minutes that you wish we would know. And yes, you deserve a couple hours for this, but you got 3 minutes.
I'll tell you this. I will tell you this. I think this matters. People always ask, what's the one piece of advice you would give? And obviously I have a lot of things to say on a lot of topics, but one of the hardest things that I ever did as a human being was come out and to live my authentic self and in my own skin. And coming out as a queer woman in a conservative place, not that easy, right? Yeah. And easily the single most scary thing I've ever done. And there isn't anything since, before or since, that has been that terrifying, which means that anything from here to the end of time feels like there isn't any boardroom that I don't belong in. There isn't any meeting that I can't take. There's no speech that I wouldn't give. There isn't anything I wouldn't say that feels authentic because I already did the hard thing. Like I've already made the tough decision to be my whole self.
Right.
You don't have to be queer in order for that to be true, right? You don't have to be part of the LGBTQ community in order for you to make the decision that you should live your whole authentic self in the life that you choose, because that's going to be the scariest thing you ever do. So, in terms of advice, in terms of what I would leave you with is, I'm not trying to be somebody's role model. I'm trying to live my life in a way that feels true to me. I think if we all do a little bit of that, we'll be better off.
That was perfect. Thank you so much. I'm sorry that it was such a hard path for you. I'm glad now that you are what you are, and we're going to make it easier for people in the future, right? It gets better.
Thank
Hey,
you.
this has been fantastic. Irma, thank you so much. I know you got so much going on, and you gave us an hour of your time, and I loved it, and I think the audience did. I'm sorry we didn't get it to all the questions. There were some other great ones. We're going to connect you with some folks who very much want to connect with you. If that's right, we'll put them in touch with Santiago. But thank you again so much. I'm going to turn it over to Jen for final words here. And Jen, you're muted. You're still muted. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, I'm good. Irma, this has been so heartwarming. I think I speak for so many of us. Our texts were flying. People are just so grateful that they tuned in. It's been incredibly inspirational. I know I have been hanging on every word. Your story is just truly unbelievable, and I thank you so much for sharing it. And
Thank you, Jennifer.
For a lot of us. So I really, truly, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you. And of course, Dean Toole, we really appreciated hearing about your journey. And thank you to all of you who were part of the audience and for staying in touch with the College of Engineering. And we really hope that you join us for our next town hall. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good job, Irma. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.